All right. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome. Here we go. Okay. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome. Welcome from the waiting room, and also re-welcome to those who are with us. We've already begun for the day. We are now in session 2 of Prophet Muhammad, A Life of Light, and we are talking about the original sources. There are 2 main Sirah books that are the original sources, one by Ibn Ishaq from the 8th century in Damascus, and one by Al-Tabari in the 9th century in Baghdad. And they both relied on these phrases that took into account the inconsistencies and the various levels of authenticity of the information that they were including in their stories. And these 2 phrases were, "It is alleged that," and as to which of these is true, only God knows, or God knows best. And that's because they wanted to include it. Well, it seems that they wanted to include everything that they could within their original Sirah books, but they also acknowledged that that this was a combination of truth and stories. And that's what I am also acknowledging here, is that in this telling, as in every telling, there is a combination of quote unquote facts and stories. And they all together make up the truth, but we take them with different levels of authenticity. And I invite you to do that, because that is within our tradition of Islam. It is not a 21st century approach to Islam. It goes back to, again, the original sources, which is why I bring this up. And I was just leaning into also how this connects to the idea of miracles. We're taught in the Quran that Muhammad was merely a man, that there was nothing supernatural about him, except that he received these messages from God, that he received the revelation. And so from that position, my place of spirituality holds to me that the Quran is the greatest miracle in Islam, and this is what I have been taught, and that everything that Muhammad did was an interpretation of that sacred message that came to him, and how he interpreted it and acted in the world. And he was merely a man who was capable of making mistakes. And we will see that today and as we move forward. So having said that, there's also a great tradition of miracles that are assigned to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And I will be incorporating some of those. It is up to you whether you choose to receive those as allegories, as metaphors, as stories with lessons and meanings and gems, or whether you receive those as literal fact, as miracles that took place, that people experienced, that Prophet Muhammad himself experienced. Islam is wide, and so in this space, we will not decide among these things. We will bring them all in and let them coexist with our own critical thinking approach. Okay, now I'm going to do a screen share, because here we go. Oops, hold on. Before I do that, a few more people in the waiting room. Welcome, folks. I'm going to screen share now, and we are, here we go. Close that. Okay, hopefully that's a suitable view. Let's do this. Thank you for your patience. Okay. There you go. Now you can see me and see the words. Okay. So hold on. This is where we are today. We're in session 2, and here's where I'd like to go first. So these are my sources. I'm using 4 books. I've already talked about these 4 books, but I want to name them in case you're here for the first time. The first is Revelation, the story of Muhammad. It's written by Miraj Muhyiddin. I love this book because it is a textbook, and it is one of the first places I've seen that has maps and diagrams and breaks the information and the stories out. You can see, yeah, this is what the inside looks like. It's fantastic. It's $80 online. If you would like a copy for $40, include your name and email address in the chat box. And we are putting in a bulk order with the author and publisher, and we hope that the author will be with us for our final session. He is also a student of the Quran and the Sirah, and yeah, it's a remarkable book. Secondly is inspiration from the life of Muhammad, peace be upon him, by Dr. Maher Hattoub. Dr. Maher was my mentor and one of my closest friends for 15 years until he passed away. And it is largely because of him and his approach to the Quran and to Islam that I am here today, and I'm grateful for it. The way that he approached Islam and approached the stories, it was life-changing to me, and I hope to bring some of that to you through his voice in this book. Then we have Keisha Ali, who is a professor at Boston University, and her book is fascinating because she looks at the lives of Muhammad, meaning the various siras of Prophet Muhammad, so the various stories that have been told about his life since day one. And it's fascinating because she breaks down century by century where the emphasis was in the story. And then lastly is The First Muslim, The Story of Muhammad by Leslie Hazelton, who is a convert to Islam and tells his story like a novel. It is not a novel, but it is in some ways historical fiction, and that's what I've called it because it tells the story through without any footnotes. I double checked this, without any footnotes throughout, but with heavy bibliography at the end, but it's hard to tell what comes from which source. So for me, that makes it in a slightly different class than some of the other books. So those are my primary sources. I also want to point out that in Keisha Ali's book, where she talks about all the different siras that have been shared of Prophet Muhammad, she makes this point, which is that there are just 14 facts that are commonly agreed on in Muhammad's life start to finish. And you're looking at them. Over the years and in all the siras that have been told, it is these 14 facts that we can hold as firmly true. All of the other texture, all of the other stories that we're going to visit are just that. They are explanations on these things. They are different views on what took place. And it's important that we view them that way because everything else is up for debate. It's disputed. And it's told in more than one way by all the biographers. So I'm inviting all the stories that I'm going to share with you. I'm inviting you to absorb them and investigate them to see what they tell us about who he was and who we strive to be. I'm going to pause here to let Okay. Back to the screen share. Thank you. Okay. So this is critical. And I'm going to try not to repeat myself, but it is important because we need to have a view on where the skeleton is and what, okay, I'll save that stuff. So let me switch back over now to see, so I'm about the teaching or storytelling portion for today, where I will remind you what took place last time, and then we'll get into the portion for today. I want to remind you at this point to put your questions in all caps in the chat box, and any comments can be in regular texts. But again, put your questions in all caps. And I see that someone says, are the session recordings posted for us to watch after? So sort of, they're not currently posted, but I hopefully have all of you on my email list. And if you're getting emails from me, that means that you're on the registration list. If you haven't gotten any emails from me, then you need to put your email address in the chat box or email me directly at edina.consulting@gmail.com. That's one option. The other option is info@islamiccenter.com. And then I email them out afterwards. We will be posting them online, but just not yet. So that's that. Okay. See if I can get these people. Okay, everybody's out of the waiting room. Welcome. Okay. So now I'm going back into screen share mode. Thanks for your patience. Okay, and okay, let's go here. So when we were together last week, what we focused on was the pre-Islamic era. Everything that led up until the moment that Prophet Muhammad, or until Muhammad became Prophet Muhammad, his whole formative years. We covered from, not just from 570 when he was born to 610 AD, but we covered his lineage, and we covered the critical elements of his upbringing, from going from an orphan to a tradesman to a father, to a husband to a father, and all of the ways that this developed and sharpened him from the womb until the moment that Allah chose to reveal to him the earliest verses of the Quran. And that's what we will be covering today, the first 5 years of Islam. And so before we go there, I want to remind you what we talked about last time. Let me find my water. For me, this is my take 5, if you will. This is my 5 takeaways from last time. If we encapsulate Muhammad's first 40 years, what do we know about him? We know that he was an orphan who lived in 5 different households in 8 years. If you have children, if you remember yourself being a child, think about that level of instability, of movement, of trust building and rebuilding, and the amount of personality formation that must have occurred during that time. And the fact that he still knew that he was cared for and loved by different members of his family. Secondly, as he was growing up as a child, as a young man, I noticed how much duality existed in his story and in his personality development, that he was both independent, that he had to rely on himself, and that he also was really loyal to the people who took care of him, and that it didn't diminish the love in his heart, or so it seems. That he was both a loner, and that he was extremely trusted by other people, and that he also, while he really enjoyed people, it seems that family bonds and time were really important. He also spent a lot of time by himself, whether it was as a shepherd or later on doing the work of the caravans that he did, and later on when he chose to make time in his life to go and meditate, to make time for himself, to connect to God, to the bigger creator that he knew, that existed within him, that he was seeking a connection. Third is that this beautiful love story between him and Khadija is more than just a love story. That's the central piece. But for me, thinking about the relationship between Muhammad and Khadija makes me want to cry because of who Khadija was, because she was an exception in her society. Because she was once or twice widowed, because her previous husbands had some wealth, she was a businesswoman. She was handling things, and she had power, and she had autonomy, she had independence, she had decision-making ability that so many other women around her didn't have. And what kind of partner did she seek? What was the most important thing to her? Trust. It was because you'll remember that she sent her servant with Muhammad when she hired him to lead a caravan for her. She basically had her servant spy on him to see what he was like, that she could see that she could trust him, that trust was his greatest currency, his greatest wealth. To me, stands out so powerfully because it meant that she could have a partner, and it meant that Muhammad too had a partner in marriage. And Khadija, as we're going to see today, without Khadija, nothing would have happened. I mean, Allah knows best, but we'll talk more about that today. But through their union, their partnership, they also built a chosen family with their children, 4 surviving daughters, 2 sons who passed away when they were very young, and then their 2 adopted sons, Zayd and Ali, who were members of the family as well. And then he still held Abu Talib really close. Abu Talib